So last weekend, the DNC Unity Reform Commission had its final meeting to work on basically reforming the Democratic Party. I mean, that's what they are. Now, here with me, of course, is Ron Placone, here to discuss the changes, and then we're going to talk about is this enough? Is this even going to happen? And I already know your answer, Ron, but let's not spoil it for the audience. So I want to discuss a couple of the changes. We'll start with superdelegates, right? So superdelegates, obviously a huge problem, incredibly undemocratic inside the Democratic Party, which makes absolutely no sense. The Republican Party at this point is actually more Democratic when they run a primary than the Democratic Party. So, I mean, that's a big problem. When you're actually ceding ground to the Republicans and saying that, hey, man, look, they have a more democratic nomination process. Yes, that nomination process did bring us Trump, to be fair. And you can use that as an argument against it. But, look, there's no reason that the Democratic Party needs to hand over control of the nomination process to lobbyists and party insiders that are always going to vote for the establishment. So a lot of us were pissed off about it. I mean, I was pissed off about superdelegates. I know you were, Jimmy Dore was as well. And all of us progressives, we looked at that system and we said, that's got to change. So in this reform commission, they proposed a new system. It says, this is according to BuzzFeed, the superdelegates who are elected officials and distinguished party leaders would remain unpledged delegates. In 2016, that group numbered about 280 people, according to Vox. The rest, DNC members, there's about 447, would keep the title of superdelegates, but their votes would be bound proportionally to the vote count in their states in the first ballot of voting at the convention. In the case of a second ballot, all superdelegates would be unbound. This proposal would effectively eliminate about 60% of all superdelegates, though not in name. So, and it goes on to say that some DNC members were joking about how they wanted to keep their fucking lanyard. I don't really care about that. Whatever. 60% of superdelegates gone. It's not all of them, but it is a reduction. Your thoughts, Ron?
So, the acceptable number of superdelegates is zero.
Zero.
That's the acceptable number. I'm glad that the Unity Commission is going on, and I applaud a lot of the people that are doing the work for it. We talked to Nomiki Constant Studio yesterday. I
She's
applaud
awesome.
her for her efforts. I applaud her for having that video go viral. And I think those efforts are very important. By no means would I ever try to diminish those or say that they're not incredibly important. They are. However, there was an episode of South Park a long time ago where they were critiquing the Catholic Church. And this, of course, was back when, there were a lot of instances of pedophilia in the news and stuff like that within the Catholic Church. And there's this
now they're just in Congress. Or now they're just running for Congress.
Right. So, and there was this one priest, and he was, kind of like the good guy, right, in the cartoon. And he goes to the Vatican, and they're talking about all these things they have to do, how they have to cover it up and this and that, and how they have to turn to their Bibles and turn to the almighty spider and all this other stuff. And then the priest says, how about we just not have sex with kids? And everybody goes, what? No, we can't do it. And that's what I think of when I look at the DNC. Like, how about we just have an honest democratic process? What? No, we can't do that.
That is a bridge too far.
People what they want. No, we can't do that. We get to keep some of the super delegates. And I have a feeling when this comes to the vote, they're going to shoot it down. They're going to be like, well, why don't we just keep the super delegates? We can't just keep some of them and not all of them. Or they're going to say, well, we'll keep this amount of the super delegates, but they get to vote however the hell they want. They can screw over their voting populace if they feel like it. I have a feeling that's kind of what's going to happen. I don't have very much confidence in the DNC making these extensive changes. I don't think they're interested in changing. And I also don't think – and honestly, I think they're going to use this Alabama thing. I think they're going to spin it to their advantage. They're going to say, hey, clearly centrism's working because we were able to beat a pedophile by 1.5 points. So, so yeah, I don't see the reforms happening. I really hope I'm wrong, but
I hope I'm
I
wrong as
have a
well.
feeling they're not going to happen.
So you're obviously the more cynical person in this one. That's normally my job. Why you got to muscle in my territory, dude? It's not cool.
Hey man, just
But
I
look,
judge future behavior on past behavior, whatever that phrase is. So
yeah, look, I largely agree with you. The correct number of superdelegates is nothing. I did a video, I think, earlier this week, maybe last week, where I talked about like, oh, they're going to get rid of some of the superdelegates. Well, great. We're going to have more gradual change, and then call it mission accomplished. No, that's not how you get change. You get change by having radical change. And again, this is not to, you know, just like you said, it's not really to cast a negative light on all the hard work put in by people like Nomiki Konst who were on there, who made passionate arguments. But what they're working against is a system that is stacked against progress, which is stacked against change. It is for the status quo. So right now you have the DNC that's filled with people who love the status quo, who are only there because of the status quo. So they're going to be really hard pressed to change it. Now, where I'm a little less cynical than you is I think that if we still, as people, as voters, put enough pressure onto the DNC and keep following it, because again, they can't really do this in daylight, right? They want to make sure that we forget about it, that we're not paying attention, and that's when they can go and fuck us over. If we pay attention, they might not be able to do that, at least not
I
openly.
don't think enough people are paying attention, to be honest with you.
And
I
that's
think
what we need to
the only
change.
people really paying attention to the reform efforts are the people that really want to see the reform. Progressives like you and I. And the DNC has thumbed their nose at us every single opportunity they've had. And look at the things that the commission is asking for. Transparency and where the money goes.
That's really important.
They shouldn't even need to request that, though. It's sad that they need to request that. And an actual democratic process from the Democratic Party, where they're not even conceding to all of it. They're giving us some of it. They're like, let us be able to still cheat a little bit. We want a little bit of cheating left. And so, yeah, the acceptable number of superdelegates is 0. I think they're going to use this as a pawn to at least allow the remaining superdelegates to vote the way they want to, or worse, they're going to use it as an argument to just keep the superdelegates around. I think they're going to thumb their nose at the transparency argument, because they're going to say that, oh, well, the DNC, we're doing better with fundraising, the Democrats are on the rise, and blah, blah, blah. They're going to do the mealy-mouth mental gymnastics to kind of get out of all this, or at least that's what they're going to try to do.
That's why I hope that there's going to be enough of us to hold them to account. I still believe in the power of people to apply pressure. It's just we have to get, the people that are constantly out there fighting, that have been organizing and doing all this grassroots stuff for change, they still need to be mobilized. We all still need to be mobilized. We all still need to fight. But there's more. There's more changes than this, the superdelegates. One is a measure to require absentee ballots in caucuses. So, look, for me, I didn't like the caucus system. I know, like, a lot of people are like, oh, it favored Bernie Sanders. And actually, he did very well in caucuses, right? I'm more for primaries, open primaries, which means you open it up to everybody. You have same-day registration, or better yet, automatic voter registration. So you don't even have to worry about registering. You already are. And you can go and take place in a primary. This idea of for absentee ballots.
I strongly favor open primaries too, but I gotta admit, when I did caucus, because I lived in a caucus state before, I lived in Washington State.
Right.
I did really like the experience. I just thought the experience was really cool. It was really like community driven. I think it really motivated people to want to get involved. Now, of course, I completely favor open primaries and opening the primaries up.
Yeah.
But if they made like an easier voting efforts and made like maybe caucuses more open too, I don't know. I'm
well,
obviously open primaries is my first desire.
Yeah.
I just sometimes when it comes to caucusing, I'm a little more against the grain, just because I had a really positive experience caucusing, and I see how that could be a very good tool to get more people into politics.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so
totally see
and
that.
maybe my experience was, like exceptional or whatever, but yeah, but I mean overall I favor open primaries above all else, and I favor that above all else. I just maybe have a slightly more positive view on caucusing than one might expect somebody like me to have.
Well, look, I can understand because you had that experience in person. The problem with caucuses is that you kind of have to be able to get there in person to
Right.
be able
No,
to
I get
experience.
it. No,
And so
I get it. You're right.
that's why I actually like this idea of absentee ballots in caucuses. So if you can't be
Mhm.
there, at least you can make sure that your voice is heard inside the caucus. I actually think that's a really good fix to that. If we're gonna have a caucus system, yeah, let people send in an absentee ballot so they can get counted, even if they have to work or they have family concerns or anything like that, or just can't make it to the caucus process. So that's actually super positive. I don't see why anybody would be against that. All right.
Agreed.
There's more making vote counts, sorry, public. That would benefit candidates apparently who do not meet the viability threshold in each caucus, meaning they do not receive support from 15% of caucus attendees and are therefore disqualified. So this would help small-time candidates who aren't very well known. I think that that's definitely an idea that came from the progressive side, saying, hey, you know what? Sometimes we have these candidates that are not very well known that are running against far more established candidates, and we don't want to see them completely get ignored and disqualified in caucuses just because nobody knows who they are yet. So I think that's
Mhm.
also a pretty good idea. And other proposals include same-day voter and party registration at the caucuses, as well as requiring that votes are cast in writing at caucuses to basically ensure accountability. That's also really good. I like that. Again, we touched on open primaries. That's another thing that they were talking about. But also, they were talking about states that have party registrations. So maybe opening up registration, changing the rules, for example, in New York that make you have to register at least 6 months in advance. I thought it was a year. Apparently, it's only 6 months, so that's my mistake on that. But having to register that far into the future, that's a bit of a problem, especially when you have a surprise candidate like we had in 2016 with Bernie Sanders. So
Mhm.
I would
Oh,
definitely
absolutely.
have that kind of. I definitely support that kind of change. I think that's a pretty good idea, and I'm not against that. And then, of course, the joint fundraising campaign, making that available to all candidates. I would rather us get all the corporate money out of politics, all the money out of
Right.
politics, period. Publicly
Right.
financed elections. But if you're going to work within the framework of the system that we have, I guess. Um, Here's an interesting rule. They proposed a rule to prohibit vendors and consultants from working for a campaign at the DNC at the same time in scenarios where there might be a dispute. So we saw that all through the 2016 campaign. Donna Brazil's book revealed that as well as WikiLeaks. All these different documents have shown that, hey, wait a minute, these consultant groups are also working for the DNC and they're working for Hillary Clinton as well. You can't have that. You can't do that.
Mhm.
Obviously, it favors one candidate far more over the other. So, yeah, I'm in favor of prohibiting that. I don't know how well it's going to go over because, as Noiki Konst pointed out, a lot of the power, if not all the power, is basically placed in 5 different consultants that are essentially running the party. And that's why we don't have transparency when it comes to the budgetary process. That's why Donna Brazil had no idea where the money was going, because it was going to
Mhm.
these 5 consultants who basically were hiding the results. Like, no, I'm not going to let you see the money. Only the party chair can see the money, right?
Yeah, well, and they were using it for their own gains too. I mean,
Absolutely.
they were paying these consultants at times when they weren't supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Obama did some of that. So yeah, I mean, there's again, I'm all about like all this stuff that the Reform Commission is calling for. I think a lot of it's sad that they need to request this stuff. I mean, it's
Right.
sad that in a major party in the United States, we need to just ask for some transparency in the budget.
Would be nice,
That
yeah.
stuff should already be available. That stuff should be available to the public. And I think it's sad that we need to ask for just a democratic process in our nominations procedure. But we do, and I have a feeling it's going to be shot down.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. Like a lot of these are pretty good. We disagree with the obviously the superdelegates. We want to get rid of all the superdelegates.
Yes.
So that right there, I believe that's going to get shot down. The transparency with the budgetary process inside the DNC also going to get shot down. I do see a couple of these being changes because, look, you know how the Democratic Party works. You have a few small changes on the outside and continuity on the inside.
Yeah.
And then they go and they tout these small changes, which are good, right? And they go,
Yeah.
historic reform. We have changed the DNC. Come on back in, millennials. Come on back in, progressives, and vote for our centrist candidates.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good analysis because I mean they do have every incentive to do whatever would make voting itself easier. I mean when there's higher voter turnout, Democrats pretty much always win. Versus Republicans. So they would have every incentive to open up open primaries could hurt them on the on the primary level because of progressives winning more, but. A lot of that stuff, they have no reason not to say yes to a lot of it. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be all A or B where they're just going to completely shoot it down. But, as far as the big bullet points, I don't see it. I don't see the superdelegates going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with
I
that.
don't see them being much more ethical or transparent with the money. Those are the two biggest bullet points, and I don't see either of them happening.
Yeah, I think you and I are definitely in agreement on those two big bullet points. But we'll have to see when they actually do the voting. It's going to be about 6 months from now, which is nice because nobody's going to be paying attention. So we've got to keep, look, when the voting is set to begin, we're going to definitely have to come back and do a segment and remind people like, hey, this is going on tomorrow. This is what they're going to vote on. And we need to pay attention. We need to pressure them to try and do the right thing. Because if nobody's paying attention, then of course they're going to do the wrong thing. Just like they always do.